Hi, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of Mormon Stories podcast. It's September 7th, 2022. I'm mindful that I'm recording kind of at the tail end of the Mormonism Live episode with Richard Dutcher, and I just want to tell everyone who's joining live, go watch Mormonism Live. I just need to get this out tonight, mostly because I just need to get it off my chest. And so please go watch Mormonism Live. You can come back and watch this anytime. I'm just releasing it to get it off my chest. Today I'm doing something that I've done multiple times in the history of the Open Stories Foundation. It's kind of what I call a transparency update. I like to be transparent as a nonprofit. I like to model that. A lot of us sometimes have criticized, the church or other organizations for not being transparent. And I like to just kind of face things head on when there are changes or when there are issues. And so that's what I'm doing tonight is I'm providing you guys with the transparency update. I don't think that this is really a big deal. I don't think most people are going to care, but I'm doing this mostly for donors or loyal supporters, or just for those who care about the Open Stories Foundation or Mormon Stories and just want to know what's going on. But please don't think that I think that what I have to say is like super important or that you're going to care. Just tune in if you care and if you want to know what's going on, and if you don't, or if you find this boring, that's great. I want to start with kind of a difficult and a sensitive conversation. Um, I'm thrilled with the content creators that are out there. Right now, the people that I think of most are like Radio Free Mormon and Bill Reel. They've come on the scene just really strongly in the past few years and have done such an amazing job. But I've also thought about how many people have kind of come and gone or never even entered the kind of progressive or post-Mormon content creation business. And I've also thought about, just honestly, as I'm doing a little bit of soul searching, how hard this job has been for me and for many people who've worked with me over the past several years. And so I decided one night when it was like 3 a.m., I couldn't sleep. I haven't been sleeping well the past several weeks and months, honestly. Um, so I decided, 3 a.m. in the morning, to just make a list of all the reasons why this job is so brutal, why it's been so hard for me, and why it's been so hard for so many people that have worked for me, and why it's been so hard for many of the people that I know that have come and gone in this space or have decided never to join it just because it's so brutal. And this is the list that I came up with. So why is it hard to succeed in the progressive or post-Mormon content creation or activism space? So first of all, you have to have extensive technical skills to do anything on podcasts or YouTube or TikTok or anything. You kind of have to know audio, quality audio. You kind of have to know video, lighting. You have to know how to work the internet. You have to have a good sense for marketing. You have to be, good at writing, editing, both, your text writing, but also editing audio and video. And then you have to be able to manage stuff. So there's a kind of a relatively big barrier to entry in this space. And then to add to that, you have to know a lot of stuff. And when I say a lot of stuff, I mean, you have to know a lot about Mormon history, Mormon doctrine, Mormon theology, or people just aren't going to care about you or really take you seriously. So, you have to build up a knowledge base. You have to be creative and entertaining. And I'm not saying I'm either, but I am saying that if you're the extent to which you're not creative or you're not entertaining, you're probably not going to do well in this space. You have to be able to create a high volume of consistent, creative, accurate, and high quality content. And again, I'm not saying that I do any of those things, but to be successful on the internet, you have to create at least something once a week in the YouTube or the podcast space. And on TikTok, they kind of want you to create something once a day. Instagram has also got its own algorithms, but you have to just create consistent, reliable content over time. You also have to be willing to become, and this is one of the hardest things, to become a public figure in a critical posture. Obviously the Mormon Church is a multi-hundred-billion-dollar organization. They've got their allies, their followers, their critics, their resources, their money, their legal support. And that's hard, but also it's just hard if you're going to be an activist to fight for anything, including social justice or, fight injustice in the church or pain or suffering, you kind of have to be willing day in, day out to kind of be in a critical mindset and to deal with a lot of heavy, dark stuff over time. And that wears on you. It's just much healthier and easier to be positive, to be uplifting, to just focus on positive, healthy things. So that's a hard thing. You also have to be willing and able to swim in constant negativity and trauma. Because, as soon as people start reaching out to you and thanking you and wanting your help, they're sharing with you all that they're dealing with on a daily basis. And it can be a lot. And that can kind of wear you down. And honestly, living in this space and dwelling in the space in many ways can kind of delay your own healing. You also have to be willing to alienate believing Mormon family and friends. And anyone who's joined this space, it's stressed out their relationship with their parents, their spouses, their kids, their friends, their in-laws, their ward members, former ward members, whoever it is. That's a hard thing to ask of anybody. You also have to be able to deal with constant criticism from all sides. You're going to get criticism from Orthodox Mormons and believers, but you're also going to get haters who are in the ex-Mormon space, people who feel competitive, people who want to take you down just because they think they could do a better job. And many can, and many should. But it's just constant, endless criticism. And sometimes the worst criticism is the criticism you levy at yourself. Criticism in your own head. You also have to deal with former colleagues and friends betraying you. And this, honestly, for me and Margie has been the hardest thing, is that you'll support people, you'll develop people, you'll work with people. And some of them are going to turn their backs on you and not just leave you, but sometimes stab you in the back. That's not everyone. That's kind of a minority, but we've definitely dealt over the years with people who we thought we had trust with, we developed friendships with, and then they turn around and literally try and destroy you. And it's hard. But there's something weird about this space where a certain percentage of the people that you work with are gonna stab you in the back and try and destroy you. And that, that leads to being willing to face, false and damaging accusations, not just from believers and from apologists, but again, from former friends and ex-Mormons. And it's no secret to a lot of you that I've faced some of the worst possible smears and criticisms you could face, being accused of some of the worst behaviors ever. And, to this day, there's never been a financial scandal or even disruption within the OSF and the board that I'm aware of. I've worked hard to be an ethical and honest person. I'm not perfect, but but still people are going to basically call you a monster and accuse you of horrible things sometimes. And that just comes to the business. I've talked to creators in other ex high demand religious groups or ex cult kind of spaces, and they tell me it's the same thing there. And that provides me with some consolation. We've talked about this before. You also, if you want to accept donations, you have to know how to run a 501c3 nonprofit, which is its own expertise. And that includes needing to learn how to choose a staff and hire people and work with the board of directors, which is really complicated and hard sometimes. And then you have to make it all financially sustainable, which is excruciating and terribly hard. And it takes forever to be able to kind of build up to that space. So you have to be willing to, have a full-time job and kind of do this on the side while you develop a content stream and a revenue stream. And that's difficult to kind of moonlight doing this while you have full-time jobs and while you're providing for your family. It's super hard. And, most of you will know that I went a good 5 years with making little to no money before I ever started bringing in anything that even could start to support my family. And now that's been a huge sacrifice for my family. And then, you also risk your career or current livelihood when you take a leap like this, because as soon as you become a public figure, there's a lot of people that are just never going to want to hire you again because you've made a public name for yourself. Frankly, there's people that don't even want to like a Facebook post or a tweet or, follow you or subscribe to what you're doing because it's so terrifying, the repercussions of just following Mormon Stories or John DeLynn or commenting on a post. People have had relationships end just because they commented on a Facebook post or, reshared a link to something done on Mormon Stories. Imagine, the ways that you limit your relationships and your safety and even your possible career by being a host or appearing on the podcast. So that's brutal. Um, and then, once you actually are financially decent and you even have a little bit of spare money to maybe bring some additional help on, when you do, you're subjecting them to everything on this list. And it's hard. It's been hard on every single person that I brought into the space. They've struggled on all these levels. And a lot of people are in some ways too smart to get into this business. They don't want to sacrifice family or friends or relationships or money or their hireability or their income or whatever. And so, or they don't just want to deal with the stress. So there's a ton of people that are just never going to come into this space. And so you're going to be limited, frankly, on the people that you're able to hire, on the talent you're going to be able to draw. And finally, working in this space over time, you develop trauma. And then you bring that trauma into the workspace, whether that's fear, whether that's paranoia, whether that's just fear of being hurt or betrayed. And I'm going to just say that's me in spades. Just from the very first time I tried to grow in this space and then experienced a lot of trauma and board issues and staff issues, I've never been the same. And so for that reason alone, the trauma that I bring to this space, I'm probably really hard to work with on so many ways. And I'm just being honest about that. And then, finally, to be successful in this space, what I've said is if I have one superpower, it's that I haven't quit, because it takes forever to get a name for yourself, to build a brand, to build a reputation, to build a following, and to do it with no money. And then when you face all the adversity, you just want to quit. And so many people quit. So many people never start. A lot of people start and then they do it a month or two and then they quit. Some people last a year. Almost no one's last a couple of years. And there's very, very few people that have existed in this space, for the 18 years that I've been doing it. There's just very few. You can count probably on two hands, maybe one hand, the number of people that just haven't quit and that have done this for longer than 5 years. It's almost no one. So that's the list of why, for me, some of the list of why it's been so hard. Plus, it's just super hard if you're in a relationship. It's hard to maintain a relationship in this space. Many people who have been in this space have ended up not being married anymore. That's not a good or bad thing. That's not to blame, people whose marriages have ended on being in this space. But Margie will be the first to tell you, as will I, that this space is brutal on a marriage, and it's brutal on your kids, and it's brutal on everything. So it's just super hard. And for all those reasons, just so many people never start. And for those who do start, so many quit. So, I just wanted to share that as a transparency item, because this is true and this is the life I live. And, people are always going to gossip and talk about things. And so I just want to put that on the table. That's my life for the past 18 years. And it's brutal. And it's also amazing because, of course, there's the good. There's helping people. There's being happy about helping people. There's having people be super grateful for what you do and feeling like you're changing lives and making a difference and fighting injustice and bringing healing and growth to the world. So I don't want to be a crybaby here. I don't want to make it sound like pity me and woe is me and anything like that. Because I'm really grateful for what I do. And I wake up every day excited for what I do. And I consider it, the number one most important thing I've ever done. And the, most impactful and meaningful thing I've ever done is my relationship with Margie and my relationship with my children. That's the most important thing I've ever done. And Mormon Stories comes in probably second, probably a distant second, but an important second. And so I feel honored and privileged every day to be able to do what I do. And that's true. So that's true in addition to how hard this space is. Now what I want to do in the spirit of transparency is acknowledge a major flaw or weakness in me and in the way that I've managed Mormon Stories and the Open Stories Foundation over the past, let's just say 12 years since I started the nonprofit. And this is me being really raw, being very vulnerable, and just acknowledging a huge mistake that I've made that's hurt a lot of people. And I'm just going to hit it head on, and I'm going to call it the cycle. And this is the cycle, the OSF or Mormon Stories cycle. And it relates to kind of what I and we as a board do when I or we have success. And so here's kind of how it goes. So I'm chugging along, doing Mormon Stories. I've got whatever board that I have, and we experience some success. And sometimes, you know, if the revenue gets good enough to where, you know, my financial needs are getting met and there's some extra, then immediately I feel a responsibility to increase the quantity of what I release or the quality of what I release. And so over this most recent cycle, you've seen, you know, me bring on Gerardo to improve, you know, the thumbnails. Gerardo's come on to increase our production quality. So our camera and our lighting, and Gerardo's been a huge asset. I brought on Brooklyn to help with audio and video editing. She's been amazing. I've brought on various staff members to help with time codes and show notes. I've even brought on other co-hosts, you know, recently, to help bring diversity and to bring alternative views and to add personality to the mix. And a lot of you have really enjoyed. Some of you have said, John, you don't need co-hosts. Why do you do that? Others have said, John, I really loved your co-host. I really valued it. Or I valued the diversity that they brung. So those are things that I've done recently. We've tried to expand our content offerings by bringing on people like Simon Southerton to do a series on science, John Larson to do Mormon expression stuff, Nemo to do stuff internationally. And recently I brought on Mike to do work with LDS discussions. And so you've seen just this kind of big spike in quantity and hopefully quality of content. And that's what I've tried to do with this burden. I don't want to say burden of success, but with this feeling of responsibility that's come along with our success. Also, you know, we've tried to develop our shorts business in the TikTok realm and in Instagram and YouTube shorts. And that's brought more attention and marketing to our business and helped drive our success, frankly. And then many of you know that on the side, I've tried to grow Thrive, largely as a separate organization, but there's been overlaps between Thrive and Mormon Stories and the Open Stories Foundation. But Thrive has just generally been dedicated to creating communities of healing and growth for people to kind of help them build a what's next and find friends and community to do what they do. And recently we've done some faith crisis workshops. And in the past, I've done retreats and all sorts of things. So that's what I do when I feel responsibility is I try and grow. I try and do more and bring on more people and make that successful. And so a big part of that in the past is bringing on more staff and support. But what that does is it makes things harder. It adds complexity to manage all this stuff. And a big flaw that I have that John Larson has helped me see when I consulted with him recently, and Margie and the board, is that I try to wear two basic hats whenever I expand. I stay on as host of Mormon Stories and do a lot of content production and content creation, because that's what I love. And I think I've gotten decent at it. And so I do that. And that's a full-time gig. That's probably multiple full-time gigs, but that's what I do. But I also try and be executive director of a nonprofit, which is a huge mistake for two reasons. Number one, that's a dedicated role that should have its own responsibility. John Larson has told me this very strongly recently, and I think my board and Margie would agree. But I don't always want to let go of the power. I don't always want to let go of control. I don't always know if I can find someone who I can trust. And frankly, that's a position that if I hire the right person, it's a very expensive position and it's a very risky position, because you bring someone here and then if it doesn't work out, it implodes. And so I've been hesitant to bring on a dedicated executive director. And so I've tried to wear two hats. And frankly, I don't want to manage people. And so it's almost, if I'm just being fully transparent, um, you know, I'm saying this vulnerably, it's kind of irresponsible for me to try and do all I do with the podcast and to try and be an executive director. And I think I've hurt people in the past by trying to do that. And so this adds more stress to me, more stress to the organization. It gives me less time to do what I love most, which is creating content. That makes me grumpy and it makes me grouchy. It introduces more risk to the organization if something is to go wrong. And, you know, you kind of think of Mormon stories as this goose that lays all these golden eggs. And you don't want to like grow the chicken coop and try to bring on more hens or chickens. It's a bad metaphor if it's going to kill the or hurt the original goose that lays a golden egg. And every time I expand, bring on staff, expand our offerings, I'm introducing risk to our core asset, which is Mormon stories. And that's not to mention subjecting the new staff to all the stresses of this space that I just mentioned. So remember this big list that I just mentioned. Whenever I bring on staff, I'm introducing staff to this huge list of problems that I just enumerated. And in some sense, that's just not fair. And that's irresponsible. Although they're adults, they're big people, they can make their own decisions. So, but what has happened over and over and over again is that people get chewed up in this space, chewed up by my mistakes and my mismanagement, chewed up by the space itself, chewed up by the stresses, and there's been a lot of burnout, and I feel bad about that, but that's just been a fact. And it's something that really arose a few months ago where I'm like, I gotta stop this. I gotta stop doing this. But it's taken a couple months for me and Margie and the board to really settle into kind of, you know, the hard decision of what to do about that. So this has been an unhealthy pattern over the past 12 years. I'm owning that. Where we have success, we expand, we make a huge difference in our expansion, but then things get super hard. We come close to overheating and ruining everything. I meet with the board, and then we kind of decide that we need to regroup and contract. And then deal with the aftermath of contraction. And the aftermath of the contraction is often people's feelings are hurt. There are frustrations with the people that, you know, that are on staff or that have been working with us or with board members. And then you have to deal with rumors and with ill will of people who are either legitimately hurt, you know, and in that, you know, I'm taking ownership of the fact that there are people who, when we part ways, are legitimately hurt and have legitimate grievances sometimes. But then you also have to deal with rumors, and there's all sorts of people that want to inject narratives into what's happening, lay their own biases, or even try to smear or damage me or the organization with unfounded rumors and smears, because, you know, that's just what people do. And a lot of these people, you know, they don't know what they're talking about. But the problem is you can't really talk about personnel matters or private things, either out of respect for the people involved or just because it's unprofessional. And so you have to deal with it, with all the hurt feelings and the rumors and the aftermath. And this has happened at least 4 times in the history of the OSF. And because I'm in charge, I'm where the buck stops. I'm primarily responsible, even though I'm grateful to my board that has always had my back and has always been an important part of this, as well as Margie, who's weathered, now 4 of these major kind of patterns. And so that's where we are today. We've had an amazing, successful year, but we've overheated and things are at a critical point where we're needing to reconsider and contract. And honestly, I would never contract on my own. And part of what's toxic about my cycle is that the way I deal with stress and discomfort and sadness is I work harder. So I bury my own stresses and sadness and difficulties by just working harder and working harder. And so for me, it's super toxic where I get to the point where I'm sleeping 3 to 4 hours a night. I'm working 20 hours a day. My family is saying, Dad, you're distracted all the time. And Dad, it doesn't seem like you're healthy anymore. And I'm in denial, overdoing it. So that's where we are. And recently Margie came to me and said, something's got to change. And my board's come to me and said, John, you need to make some serious changes, because it's not fair to staff and it's not fair to the board to keep putting everyone through these cycles, which I'm just trying to own I've been doing. And so I just have to say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to my boards, past and present, my staff, past and present, and to listeners, and mostly to my family for putting them through these gyrations. But I have been doing it and I feel bad about it. And so that's where we are. So, where are we today? And this is a really tragic and ironic and awesome and sort of hard place to be. If you look at just YouTube, now, of course, we offer stuff on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and, just regular old podcasts through the Apple podcast or Google Play. And I'm not even talking about that. I'm just talking about YouTube, which is where we've made our kind of biggest investments over the past couple of years. We're up to 10.4 million YouTube views in the past 365 days. That represents 122% growth. So when I talk about all these changes that I just made and the success, we have doubled our YouTube views or impact or channel just in the past 365 days. You are not going to find many organizations in their 18th year that double anything in their 18th year. Not revenue, not customers, not subscribers. But we did. We had 10.4 million just YouTube views. That's not counting TikTok views, Instagram views, and that's not counting our bread and butter historically, which has always been podcast downloads. So that's massive. But another stat that just totally blows me away is that we have had 4.4 million YouTube watch hours over the past year. That's a 90% increase. So we've basically doubled the number of hours that people are watching Mormon Stories podcast on YouTube, from like 2.2 million a year, which is mind-boggling given how relatively small and niche our audience is, to 4.4 million hours of people watching YouTube. It's crazy. And we've grown our subscribers on YouTube 30,000. So we're about to hit 70,000 subscribers, when a year ago we were only at 40,000. So we're close to doubling our subscribers within a year and a half's time. So the growth has been phenomenal. And the co-hosts and the staff and the board and the viewers and the donors and the guests that we've had on Mormon Stories, can't ever forget them. Amazing guests. They have all partaken in this amazing success and growth. So things are amazing. And, to boot, we learned this year that half of our audience has never been Mormon. So a huge part of this growth is like ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, ex-Scientologists, ex-Catholics, ex-Jews, ex-Muslims, just people who are interested in Mormonism and like to geek out about it. So like we're having just crazy success, and revenue is as strong as it's ever been. So like, what's going wrong? What are the problems? And that's, I just kind of told you in the last slide, but, I always, when we have success, feel an obligation while we're at our peak to continue growing and to ramp things up and to do more and deliver more content and to deliver more content over more channels. And that's where my headspace has been over the past year. Hopefully you've noticed that. I know my staff has noticed it, because that's the main reason I brought on staff, has been to expand. But we're at another breaking point. And I'm at a breaking point. And that, Margie has come to me and the board has come to me and said, we got to slow down. The pace is too fast. There's too much content. This job is so stressful. It's overwhelming to me. It's overwhelming to Margie and my family. And, I think I'm starting to feel like it's brutal and inhumane to bring new people into this space. And I'm particularly talking about staff and co-hosts. I just think there's a part of me that just feels like it's too toxic and too brutal of a space to really bring people into it. And that's not going to be true for everyone. There's going to be people that don't experience that, but that's what I'm experiencing. And that's what I'm starting to think and feel in this fourth cycle of contraction now. And so, yeah. And so, again, I'll take responsibility that I have management flaws. I have personality flaws. I make mistakes, and current and former, employees and staff, and they're always free to talk about that. And some won't and some will, and that's just the reality of where we are. But we have to contract. And the one thing that I really, really realized a few months ago is what I kind of said last slide, which is that the risks of being too expansive with Mormon stories, trying to do too many things, and trying to bring on way too much staff. The risk is not worth the harm to me and my family, and it's not worth the potential harm to those I bring on, and it's not worth the potential harm to Mormon Stories and to the Open Stories Foundation. So the Margie and the board have come to me over the past few months, but definitely over the past month and few weeks, and just said, John, you gotta change. You got to fix this. You need to slow down, and you need to make some structural changes. And most importantly, you need to stop this cycle of what you've been repeating now for at least the fourth time. So here's what the changes are going to be. I am going to be, we've already made a few staff adjustments. I'm going to be we're going to be reducing the amount of content that we produce. We've been doing 4 or 5 episodes a week, sometimes multi-hour episodes, sometimes 3 to 4 to 5 interviews a week. It's been crazy. We are going to be cutting back to 1 to 2 interviews a week. It may take a few weeks or a month or so to kind of get there, but we are going to be cutting back the main episodes that we release on Mormon Stories podcast. That's the first thing. That'll generally be 1 long form interview a week at the most, and then 1 other kind of current events thing, or an LDS discussions episode, or a John Larson episode, or 1 kind of special project kind of thing. So we're cutting back content. We are going to be making some staff and organizational changes. When I say me, I mean me and the board. We do it together every step along the way, past and present and future. We hire people through the board. If we let people go, we let them go through the board. I consult strategic staff in all those sorts of decisions. We're not having like a full mass contraction and layoff, but we are going to be making and have made some staff changes. I'm not going to be naming names specifically, partly because I don't have permission to, and partly because, most of the time when companies make changes, they don't name names. That's something that's kept confidential and private for a number of reasons. So another change I'm going to make is that Margie is going to be my main co-host for the foreseeable future. In terms of like, when I need a co-host, it's going to be Margie. We work well together. People love her. She's smart. She's experienced, and it's just basically convenient, and it addresses some of the other issues that I've already mentioned. So I still plan on bringing on guest co-hosts from time to time. Cara Burrell is obviously helping out with the John Larson episodes, and that's working out great. I brought on Samantha Shelley, and Nemo will come on from time to time. Like, I'm still going to be bringing on co-hosts from time to time, maybe other co-hosts as well. Who knows? But Margie's going to be the main host. I need to do some soul searching to figure out what the next 10 years of Mormon Stories and the Open Stories Foundation are going to look like. Do I want to enter in, as I cut back on content, do I want to try and increase the quality of what I do? Do I want to try and enter into new other ventures? I've spoken about, do I write a book? Do I try and make a difference in other ways? Do I try and change the tone or the mission of what we do? I don't know, but I and the board and Margie are going to be doing some soul searching to figure out if we make some meaningful changes to what types of content I work on, and and what we offer. So that's going to be happening over the next few weeks and months. And we also have to figure out a way to not repeat the cycle and to do something where Margie and my family and where everyone, we all feel good, and basically where my health and my sanity and my well-being is also taken into consideration. So, a lot of times people freak out and say, oh, does that mean Mormon Stories is going away? No, Mormon Stories is not going away. We're just going to be doing less, hopefully definitely with less staff, hopefully with higher quality, production quality, and maybe with some new offerings, and something that's more sustainable for me and my family and for the long term. And most importantly, my commitment to my board and my staff and mostly to Margie is to not repeat this cycle that leads to ill will and discontentment and attrition and that sort of thing. And then the final thing is I just want to thank viewers and supporters, donors, all former staff, all former co-hosts. Thank Margie, thank my kids, all my family and everyone who's made this, all my new viewers, old viewers, people who come in and out. Like, this job really is the pleasure and the honor of my life. I know we've made a huge difference with your help and with the help of donors and listeners and viewers and staff and co-hosts and stuff. I plan on continuing to make a big difference, but we couldn't have done it without you. And I think most importantly, we couldn't have done it without the amazing interviewees that we have on Mormon Stories. We just have the best guests and the best experts come on, and that's our core crown jewel, is just the people that are willing to come on Mormon Stories to share their expertise on Mormon Stories, or to share their stories in a vulnerable way. And so that's kind of where we are. I hope this makes sense. I hope everyone values this transparency. If I'm not being more specific in details, I would just say, feel free to please consider respecting my privacy or the privacy of our organization or the privacy of the people involved. If and when, there's more said, if and when things enter into the public discourse in terms of changes or whatever, we'll have more transparency updates where we provide donors and viewers with whatever information is needed, that is done in a respectful way, in a way that isn't harmful to anyone, that's constructive, and that just moves us hopefully all forward in a constructive way. So that's where we are. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Again, this wasn't for anyone other than people that just really care about me and my family, who care about the mission of the Open Stories Foundation, who care about Mormon Stories, or who are just curious about what's going on. Upward and onward. I love you all. Again, I'm grateful for all the people that have helped make Mormon Stories and the Open Stories Foundation successful. Hope you valued this transparency update. And, we look forward to the weeks, months, and years ahead of more content and more transparency when is needed. Love you guys. Thanks so much. Go watch Mormonism Live, support Mormonism Live, donate to Mormonism Live. They do amazing work. And please stay tuned for more Mormon Stories in the days, weeks, months, and years ahead.